everyone, my name is Dévi and this is Book Connoisseur. So, I am filming my February wrap-up. I realized today is the 20th of March, so this is a little bit late, but it is what it is. Had a lot going on this month, exciting things, but still a lot, so here we go. I read 7 books in February, 2 I read on audio, I read 2 books from the library, and 3 books that I own. So I only physically have the 3 books I own with me because it's been so long, but yes, let's go. The first book I read in February is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. Now, I'm sure you've heard about this already. It is fantastic. This book tells a story about a neighborhood called Chicken Hill, which is in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, which is very close to where I am right now. And actually the town I'm in is mentioned in this book several times, but it tells the story of the changing demographics within Chicken Hill. There is a large Jewish community there, as well as a large Black community there. It focuses on a Jewish couple living in Chicken Hill where the wife refuses to leave, and how she transcends expectations of her and befriends this Black community of people while running her grocery store. And I think it's just a really beautiful, beautiful historical fiction novel. It's really interesting to see a book focus on several different demographics rather than one specific group of people. And I just really think it was beautifully told. I do want to give a content warning. There is a scene in here that depicts violence towards children. It was pretty hard to read. If that bothers you, just be warned. And you'll kind of see it coming, so if you wanted to skip that, that's fine. I highly recommend it. The next book I read was Lord Jim at Home by Dinah Brooke. I chose a book based on the first sentences of all my McNally editions books, so all one publisher. And this book won. This book was published originally in 1973, and it was faced with a lot of criticism. It is not, I mean, this is like, this book just, I just don't even know what to think about it. It's one of those books that I'm like, what? It's so interesting and so, I almost want to say crude. It's crude. And yeah, it basically follows this well-off young man from when he's born until he's an adult, and he's sort of off, and you get the idea of, like, from his childhood you can kind of understand why he is the way he is, and so you empathize with him. But then throughout the book he makes all these decisions that are questionable, and yeah, the ending really had me like shocked. Yeah, I recommend this if you like crime fiction, but not necessarily a thriller. It's not, you know, a super fast page turner, but I read it pretty quickly, and yeah, I would recommend this with the caveat that it is crude. When it first came out, it was met with a lot of criticism because of its crudeness, and I think it's kind of hilarious in a very morbid, dark way. Yeah, so Lord Jim at Home by Dinah Brooke. The next book I read was Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. You might remember Jessica Knoll's first book was The Luckiest Girl Alive, and what's interesting is, so that book, this might be a little bit of a spoiler for Luckiest Girl Alive if you haven't seen it, but that book is about a school shooting, and it takes place down the street from where I grew up. Jessica Knoll is from the same area I grew up in, and it got a lot of criticism when it came out in my area from people who lived here and people who went to the school it takes place at. It was almost like, why make up something so horrific in a real place? It's anyway, so basically I think Jessica Knoll took a lot of the criticism from her first book and turned it around in Bright Young Women. So in this book, she tells the story of a fictionalized version of the perspective of some of the victims of Ted Bundy, and he's never actually named in this book, so the focus is completely on the victims, not on him and glorifying him. And as you may know, there's been a lot of recent movies where there was a movie where Ted Bundy's played by Zac Efron, and everyone's like, oh, he's this hot serial killer, and that's crazy. He's a serial killer. So I really appreciate what she did with this book, and I think that this was a huge success compared to her last book. So she focuses on one girl who was a witness, one victim, and then this one, basically a victim's advocate who was a friend of the victim who goes between the two. I thought this was really an intriguing point of view. Yeah, and it keeps you engaged, and I will say I did feel like the main character, who is the fictionalized witness, was a little bit predictable, but other than that, I think it was a pretty good story. So the next book I read on audio for my book club that I'm part of, and it was Sunny by Sukh Ojla. This book tells the story of an Indian British woman who is trying to navigate the world, plus size, and dating, and how she's 30, and in the Indian community, her community, that's frowned upon because she's, older, and not married. And I really liked this book because I'm not a romance reader at all, and I liked this book because I thought it focused more, while it is a romance book, it focuses more on her as a person, Sunny as a person, rather than, this unrealistic romance that she might have. I don't want to give away the ending, but I really appreciated the ending of the book. One thing that came up in book club conversation was that there's a lot of fat-phobic comments she makes, which puts some people off. So if that's not your thing, I maybe wouldn't pick up this book. The next book I read was Monsters by Claire Dederer, and this is a nonfiction. I was for sure thought this was going to be on the Women's Prize for Nonfiction, but it wasn't. But I read it anyway, and this tells, basically Claire Dederer is, I believe she's a film critic, so she is interested in how to separate the art from the artist when the artist is a horrible person. She's a big fan of Roman Polanski, who, if you didn't know, is a child rapist. And how do you consume the art but still be... Is it okay to still consume art made by a monster? Yeah, and I thought this was really interesting, and one point that I wanted to bring up was that she made the argument that often when the monster is a man, it's someone who's done something incredibly awful like Roman Polanski, but if it's a woman, it's often she's left her children behind or abandoned her family and doesn't fall into the typical role of a woman. So that was really interesting. I recommend this read. It's super accessible, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you're interested in J.K. Rowling, this is a good book to read. And I think that something I got out of this is that the relationship between myself and the art is constantly changing. It's not a static thing, it's dynamic. I thought that was interesting. Okay, the last 2 books I read in February are both on the Women's Prize for Nonfiction Longlist for 2024. The first book I read is All That She Carried by Tiya Miles, and I thought I really liked this book, but I think that it was also very particular to me. So anyway, this book is about a sack, and I'll pop a picture of the said sack here. And it was a cotton sack passed down from mother to daughter, from mother to daughter, mother to daughter, and on the sack was embroidered a little snippet of its history saying, my grandmother was given this something, I don't remember the specific wording and I can't look it up because I'm recording on my phone, but it says something along the lines of, my grandmother was given to this sack by her mother when she was sold as an enslaved person at age 9, and it contained I think it was a lock of hair, some pecans, a couple other things, but basically what Tiya Miles does is a lot of speculation over who these people were that were involved with this sack. So there's Rose, and Ashley is her daughter. Rose is the mother, Ashley's her daughter, and Ruth is the great-granddaughter of Rose, who embroidered the sack in the 20s. And what's really interesting is that this sack was found at a garage sale and rescued from this garage sale and is now in a museum. I'm probably going to talk more about this in another video when I go over all of the books I've read for the Women's Prize for Nonfiction Longlist. But if you just a snippet, the reason I thought this was so special is because I'm really into crafting, and crafting is a very big part of how enslaved narratives are told because no one taught them how to read, and the only way we know these facts about enslaved life is through stories and crafting and art, and I think that was really interesting. But I will be talking to you more about this book in another video. And then the last book I read was A Flat Place by Noreen Masud. This was also longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And this book, it's funny because I keep seeing people passing on this book saying, oh, I'm not gonna read this like for the long list, it doesn't sound that interesting. And so far I've read several of the long list books, and so far this is my favorite. A Flat Place tells the story of the author, so it's a memoir, of her childhood in Pakistan. She's half Pakistani, half Scottish, and she was basically, they had a complicated relationship with her father and their life in Pakistan, and how she's subsequently been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic disorder because of it. And that's when there's nothing specifically traumatic that happens to you, but it's just the general situations around you that are traumatic. She's interested in flat landscapes because she finds she can cope with her, it's see PTSD by being in these flat landscapes. And she's traveling around the UK exploring these landscapes, and at one point she's with her mother, and I just thought it's really a beautiful way of coping with trauma. And I think that, you know, this book could be seen as a victim narrative, but it's really not. It's really yeah, I'm gonna get into this more in a different video, but it's just really it's a special book, and I highly recommend it if you're gonna pick up any of the Women's Prize for Nonfiction long list. I would pick up this one, and it's very accessible. It's not too long, and it was really good. Yeah, so those are all of my books that I read in February. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave me a comment. Have you read any of these books? Yeah, let me know. I'd love to know. I'd love to talk about it. And I'll see you soon for another video. Bye!